or call Billy afterward and tell him about Bobby's offer. I'm thinking that's probably in addition to that. Some of you think you shouldn't say anything about the competing offers. Some of you think you should tell Billy about the price and terms of Bobby's offer. And so that tells me a little bit about what's going on, and that helps me know what other kind of questions that we'll end up with. Okay, thank you. Okay, with the same example, if Lucy tells Bobby about Billy's offer, what can Bobby do with that information? Bobby knows that there's a competing offer, so now she's going to go back and meet with her buyers. If Lucy tells Billy about Bobby's competing offer, what can Billy do with that information? Most buyer's agents are aware of another agent's offer.
Mike, I just want to be clear. When you're saying that Lucy's telling Bobby about Billy's offer, are you meaning that all she's telling him is making him aware that there's another offer? You're not meaning that she's giving out details, right?
And at this point, no. At this point, no. She's just saying there's another offer from another agent.
Okay.
And that's what she has shared with mutually with both competing buyer's agents. Okay.
Yep.
And the content will be a question later on.
Okay.
Okay. So both Bobby and Billy are meeting with their buyers, and they're probably, one option that they can have, you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we've made an offer and now there's a competing offer. You can raise your offer. You can improve the terms. You could move up the closing date. You could ask for less sellers concessions. You can ask for fewer repairs based on the appraisal if that comes up. They can do anything that they feel necessary to improve their offer. That's one option. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Or the buyers could say, you told us it was a competitive market and we made a really good offer and we're going to stick with that. If we don't get it and we feel it's a really good offer, we're okay with it. And I think many of us have worked with buyers that, took that position too. Or the buyer could say, wait a minute, there's a competing offer. You're coming back to us and after we did what we thought was a good offer, and now there's a competing offer. Maybe I don't want to play. Maybe I don't want to get in a fight over this particular house. There haven't been a lot of houses to look at. This one was okay, but it was a B- house, and we can't see paying top dollar for a B- house, and we're just not going to fight over it. Is that possible? Have you had people back off on houses that they started to show interest in?
Yep.
Okay. What other challenges might there be? And that might be, what are the prior experiences of Billy buyer's agents buyers? Have they just started working with Billy because they worked with another agent where they felt they were being jerked around every time they wrote an offer because it was always a competitive offer and the agent would always come back to them and tell them they needed to pay more? Is it possible that maybe they've lost 4 or 5 houses and now they're going to pay whatever they have to? So their responses could be very different. Bobby's buyers could be diametrically opposed to whatever Billy's experience is. They could be first-time home buyers and they have multiple relatives that are telling them what to do. No, you're good buyers. You should get a good deal on the house, and if you don't get a good deal, you shouldn't buy the house. And of course, this is based on somebody who bought a house in 1972, so they understand what the market is in 2020. So their experiences might be different. So again, what's the range of responses to competing offers? You know, some people might want to compete for a house, and some people don't want to get involved in it. It's just their personality. They deal with conflict by fighting back or leaving the source of their stress. So keep that in mind when you as a listing agent are sharing the existence of offers with competing agents. So let's talk about the market right now. And I don't work in your market, but my market is in some ways similar to yours. I'm in Geneseo, which is outside of Rochester, but it's influenced by Rochester, and it's mostly rural and deal with the counties around it. But all real estate is local. There's certain parts of your market that are very active, and there's probably some parts of the market that are not quite so active. It may be a seller's market, and it may not stay that way forever. Okay? Some of you that were around in 2009, more than 5 years ago, just as the banks blew up and there was an overheated market that simply stopped because the financing was no longer available. There were a lot of houses on the market, and there were people desperate to get rid of them, and it was not a seller's market. And the challenge there was it was a seller's market, a rampant seller's market running up to 2008 because there was ridiculous financing available. So people were overpaying for houses and assuming the market was going to bail them out. And then the market crashed and it stopped being a seller's market. We're in a seller's market right now, but it may not stay that way forever. There's some niche markets that are seller's markets year in and year out. You have Chautauqua Lake. There's some other lakes around there. It seems in many cases that waterfront property is a niche where there's always demand because it's a more narrowly defined market. In many cases, waterfront is almost always a seller's market unless there's some significant economic influences that change that. Does that sound familiar?
Yep.
There's some markets where there's economic challenges and it takes years to correct. The factory that drove the economy has closed down. I know Jamestown for years was a strong market for manufacturing, especially furniture. And as those started to move offshore, there were some pretty big holes in the Jamestown economy. And I know there's some improvements that have been made too in the last few years. But there have been times where it's been pretty tough to sell, even though there's a seller's market on Chautauqua Lake. In Jamestown, there were empty houses and low prices. So keep that in mind. Today's market is not every market. And some of the things that I'm going through, those of you who have been in the business for less than 5 years and you've never experienced anything but a seller's market, you're going to need to think about things that could be different depending on where you're operating now or when you're operating in the future. So think about that. This is the statistics that NAR shares nationally, and this is typically what a seller's market is. If there's a 1 to 3 month supply of houses on the market, it's a seller's market. So define your neighborhood. The village I work in typically has about 35 sales a year. Year in, year out, there's about three houses a month. So if there's 6 houses on the market, it's a seller's market because it's only 2 months inventory. If there's 25 houses on the market rather, that's a neutral market at best, and it's close to a buyer's market because you're only going to sell about 3 houses a month on average. That's my local market, but that'll give you an idea where you're working. When you do your market analysis, look at what defines the neighborhood. It could be a school district, it could be an actual neighborhood in a city, it could be a school district outside the city, but you need to look at that before you start making judgments about how you're going to operate in the best interest of your clients, because you need to know if you're in a buyer's market or a seller's market. At the same time, buying a house is an emotional decision, and people, as rational as they want to be, okay, this is what we need, this is what we can afford, we're going to approach it rationally, it's still an emotional decision. After the fact, they'll rationalize it. And so you have to pay attention to the emotional component. So the house comes on the market, and some people are going to get really excited about it. Some people absolutely have to have that house. And once they've gone to contract or made an offer, then they're going to start being real rational about it. Okay? So they've made an offer because they were excited, and you come back to them and say, there's a competing offer. Well, they might still be emotional, or they might be rational now, say, okay, maybe I want to participate in an auction, a bidding situation, and maybe I don't. And they may choose not to compete. If you haven't experienced that yet, it will happen. And you need to be aware of that. Because when the buyers don't get the house, either because they choose not to compete or because it's gone, they'll react differently. And there's quite a range that's available. So we're going to go back to our example. Lucy has got the listing on Gemini Circle. Billy calls, this is available, I've got an offer. Arrangements are made to present Billy's offer. Bobby calls, wants to know if it's available. Lucy tells Bobby about competing offer, but house is still available, and tells her to send the offer. So Bobby sends an offer. Okay? So this matches the scenario that about 75% of you felt comfortable with. So Billy, Bobby call their buyers. They discuss the offer. And in a perfect world, one buyer raises their price and the other one backs out. So Lucy presents an offer with a higher price, says the other people backed out, but you still got the house sold, so I'm a real estate genius. Okay, so that's in a perfect world. Does everybody feel good about that if they're Lucy? Okay. In our less than perfect world, just to give you an idea where we are, we put a man on the moon before we put wheels on suitcases. Okay, so our world is not exactly perfect. Let's say both buyers have pulled out now because they went back to their buyers. The agents went back to the buyers and they said, we don't want to compete. And this happens. Lucy went from 2 offers to 0. Okay. So we're going to do a different example. So pay attention, play along with me. Billy buyer agent calls. Is Gemini still available? His buyers have an offer. I want to present it. Arrangements are made to present Billy's offer. Lucy says, send it over. I'll get it presented. or here's the time for you to show up with the offer, Billy. It's Allison again. I thought I fixed this. There we go.
Hey, Mike, can I pose a question that we had?
Sure.
So in that example A, someone's asking, do you have to tell the other agent that the other buyer backed out?
Okay, we're actually getting to that. Let me catch up to us. Okay, I thought I was going to have to go back, but I don't. So, okay. Okay, so we're back to wheels on suitcases. Okay, new example. Arrangements are made to present Billy's offer. Bobby calls. Is it still available? Lucy tells Bobby, we're in a position to look at all offers. Now, this is a rhetorical question, but I think we all know the answer. Are Lucy's sellers in a position to look at all offers? They haven't accepted any other offers. They haven't closed on the transaction. The house is still for sale. Are they in a position to look at all offers? And I think everyone has to agree the answer is yes. Bobby asks, are there other offers? Lucy says, if your buyers wish to make an offer, send it over and I'll present it. And now, Darcy, you get to run another poll for us. It's a simple one. Okay, 82% think that Lucy should have told Bobby about Billy's offer. Okay. Thank you, Darcy. So, Lucy didn't. She had the conversation that we saw. We're in a position to look at all offers. Send me the offer and I'll present it. Lucy presents the offer to her seller, and Billy's buyer's offer is within their parameters, so they accept it. That's the one that they preferred. Lucy contacts Billy that his buyer's offer was accepted and then calls Bobby, telling her that another offer came in, it was better for the sellers, and they accepted it. Okay, poll number 8. Go ahead. And I don't know if you can do more than one or not. Yes, I think you can. I think this one you can do more than one. It seems to be responding, so. There's no wrong answer. Okay, You have to tell me there's another offer. That's 60%. Why didn't they counter my offer? This is not fair. And about a third of you, thank you very much. I understand completely. Please notice that I did not put slashing tires in as an option because that would not be the way to handle that. So, all right. So it tells me where we're at. That helps me a lot. Okay. So these are the responses, and we already know what you feel like. About a third of you think D is appropriate, and there's most of you think A or B are appropriate conversations to have. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the future a little bit. Okay, this is my friend Manny's car, so we make fun of him for having a DeLorean. I don't know how he keeps it running, but he does. So we're going to give you an idea where some of this came from. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just, well, just go along with me. We'll probably touch base on what I want to do. We've got a little exercise coming too. So the NAR model bylaws for multiple listing services prior to 1988, which means all the MLSs, all the real estate boards across the country, a multiple listing system was a unilateral offering of subagency. Okay, now most of you have had some agency continuing education over the last few years because that's become an issue. Many of you learned about subagency in the salesperson's class because it was a 75-hour class and they spent more time on that. And what a unilateral offering of subagency meant was that when offers came in, everybody was working for the seller. That meant if you listed your house, your client's house for sale, everyone in the multiple listing service was acting as a subagent for your seller. So what that meant was in the multiple listing services prior to 1988, the remarks that you would see, which would typically say, okay, 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, great opportunity, roof less than 5 years old, all appliances included. That's the sort of thing we see nowadays. But back then, you would see things like pre-foreclosure, beat the bank, divorce, lost a job, transferred. You'd see all this personal information in the public remarks because we were all theoretically working for the seller. And of course, no one would ever share that information with a prospective buyer. That's the lay of the land in prior to 1988. We all worked for the sellers. So it looked very different. It felt very different. Our allegiances were very different. Unilateral offering of subagency with everyone on the side of the seller. When it came time for an offer to come to the table, you'd have 4 offers, and the seller and the listing agent would be literally, in some cases, in the same room at the same time, because agent 1, 2, 3, and 4 all had offers, but they were all working on behalf of the seller. They were all subagents. So that meant that agent 1 would get to hear what agent 2, 3, and 4 presented, and vice versa, because no one was representing the buyers. Buyers were customers. That's how people were taught to handle multiple offers prior to 1988. After 1988, the multiple listing service became a unilateral offering of compensation and cooperation. So it's where we are today. So that means when you list a property for sale, you might include compensation for a seller's sub-agent, you might include compensation for a broker's agent, and you might include compensation for a buyer's agent who doesn't represent the seller but represents the buyer, but they still get to share in the compensation. So there's far less sub-agency that's happening, and the buyers are represented by a buyer's agent. The listing agent has to maintain confidentiality on behalf of the seller, except with sub-agents. And because it's so rare for sub-agents to occur now, that means the listing agent and the seller are the only ones that know everything that's going on regarding offers. That's what the multiple listing service is now, and it has been since 1988. After 1988, well, I would say, yeah, let me mention this. When the rules changed in 1988, almost nobody noticed. We had to fill out the listing contract a little differently, but it didn't seem to make much difference because backing up, we all still worked for the seller. That was the mantra of agents, is we all work for the seller. And that change in 1988 really didn't register on many people's radar until 1992. And in 1992, New York became the 47th state in the country to require written disclosure of agency relationships. That was the first time that most people started to learn anything about agency, because before that, we had all worked for the seller. We learned about real estate in our little apprenticeship arrangements with our brokers in the office, and the company courses or what limited courses were out there. We all worked for the seller until 1992, when people became aware of buyer agency and dual agency. The agency obligations were always there. That's one thing that we have to keep in mind, is that the law of agency hasn't been changed in about 75 years. So when we got the agency disclosure form in 1992, it was simply restating what was already there. And this is the time that people became aware of the old car agency obligations, was in 1992. It was new to most people except for commercial agents. Commercial agents were aware of buyer's agency because it started actually in the 1950s. Most of it had to do with the entertainment industry. So when celebrities were looking to buy or sell property, it was important to maintain some confidentiality, and the only way you could do that was by representing them on a single agent basis. And before that, it was we always worked for the seller. A lot of agents thought it would just kind of go away and it'd be business as usual. But that was in 1992. But in June 1993, there were 130 internet websites on the world. Think about a world with 130 internet websites. I did a little search, June 8th, 2020, and I looked up buyer agent internet website. Two days ago, there were 145 million results for buyer's agent internet websites. Okay. In 1993, there were 130 websites in the world total. Probably 3 of them were travel websites, and one of them may have been Wikipedia. I don't know. Okay? But this is what happened, and this is why buyer agency is important, because the access to information and the access to representation got a lot more significant. Okay? And the internet had a lot to do with it. And this comes up sometimes. We have to be fair. Lucy should have told me, because it wasn't fair that I didn't know about the other offer. I need to share information with other agents because we are all part of the same association. We all love each other. It's all just one kumbaya moment after another. I can see Darcy smiling. And I truly love and appreciate realtor associations. I belong to a couple. I've been very active in a few. I do instructing for lots of them, and they're really important, and the people are really important. But do we really need to be fair to other agents? Sometimes we feel that we need to share information because I work in a small town. I work in a small market. It's a small county. It's a small state. I have to keep other agents happy, so I have to be fair to them. And some of you may be feeling that way. Okay? The Code of Ethics, I don't even have a poll for that. Okay? There's no poll. The Code of Ethics are the rules for the realtors. Okay? There's no question about that. Article 6, realtors shall seek no unfair advantage over other realtors and shall conduct their business so as to avoid controversies with other realtors. This may be familiar to you. And it was until 1992. Okay? That unfair advantage in 1992 changed. Article 6 became Article 1. NAR did some renumbering. They moved some things around. They put some articles together, and they were renumbered. So Article 6 became Article 1 in 1993, and it said when representing buyer, seller, landlord, or other client as an agent, realtors pledge themselves to protect and promote the interests of their client. This obligation of absolute fidelity to the interests of the client doesn't relieve their obligation to treat all parties honestly. The Code of Ethics doesn't have the word fair in it anymore. We have to be honest to all parties. We are obligated to treat all parties honestly. And because so many of the things that we do involve words, words are meaningful. They're important. So there's a difference between fair, and there's a difference between that and honestly. And this is what's in the Code of Ethics now. We have to treat all parties honestly. It's still current. So by being honest to all parties, it still requires that our client is our primary concern. So now this is consistent with our agency obligations. Before, when the MLS said that we worked for the seller regardless of who our client might be, now consistently, if our seller is the client, if our buyer is the client, we have to be honest with them. We have a duty of honesty to all parties, but the primary concern is our client. So agency and the Code of Ethics line up on this. And anyone who is not a client is a customer. That's the default. You're a client or you're treated like a customer. Customers receive honesty and fair dealing under the law, but that's under the law is fair dealing. Fair dealing doesn't show up in the Code of Ethics. Doesn't mean we have to ignore it. Being honest and fair with customers doesn't mean that we share confidential information with them. We don't share confidential information without the approval of our clients. Remember, old car is an agency obligation, and we have to have the approval of our clients to share confidential information. Approval is not anything that we're not used to asking our clients for. I need your approval because I'm going to put your house on the market, and I need to know what price you will allow me to share with prospective buyers. So I need your approval to put the price on the house. I need your approval to know what the showing arrangements are. If you're going to need 24 hours notice, or there's no showings on certain days of the week for whatever your personal reasons are, that's fine. I need your approval to put that information out there. I need your approval to know what personal items are included in the sale. Are the freestanding appliances included? Is the dock, is the floating dock, is the boat hoist, are those included? You know, what personal items are included in the sale? I need your approval. I need to know what acceptable financing, because the house is a little rough around the edges. It's going to need some painting and scraping. If we offer it available for FHA or USDA, we're going to have to deal with those repairs. Okay, so I need your permission to put the appropriate financing. What's the brokerage fee that I'm going to charge you and that I'm going to share with other parties? They have to agree to that. I need their approval. So what's the time frame of the listing? Is it 90 days? Is it 180 days? These are all approvals that the sellers give us routinely. And standard of practice 1-15 says, realtors in response to inquiries from buyers or cooperating brokers shall, with the seller's approval, disclose the existence of offers on the property. We need to ask for the seller's approval before we disclose the existence of offers on the property. So when Billy, buyer agent, calls and says, is the house still available? The answer is yes. And if he asks, are there any offers? The answer has to be consistent with the seller's approval. There's a second sentence for that. That deals with questions about other firms, and we can deal with that, but that's, you know, actually that's the one that people pay attention to on this standard of practice. The most important part, I think, is the first sentence. So we're going to get the seller's approval for all these items at the time we list the property. Price, showing arrangements, all those items. And why not talk about the strategy for multiple offers at the time of the listing? Because the possibility may be that there's multiple offers and I need their approval. One of the biggest problems with multiple offers is people don't realize that they're in a multiple offer situation until the second offer shows up. The first offer, okay, I'll call, I'll make arrangements, I'll make an appointment, we'll go over the offer, and everything's normal. But now there's a second offer. What do I do? What do I tell the other agent? Some people just go on autopilot. This is my personal strategy. This is what I was taught by whoever taught me about multiple offers. Okay? And I would say that most people get their information about multiple offers in the office, and it's from a piece of technology that's available in every office right now. Every office has it, and a lot of misinformation is exchanged with that technology. And that technology is the coffee machine. We always used to do it this way and we never had any problems. So here's what you need to do. So you need to think about your personal strategy. Your personal strategy to handling multiple offers, it might come down to a question of depends on who does or does not get the house. This is something that you need to think about. Can you document and justify your actions in the event of a fair housing problem? So you've got your own personal strategy. You tell Bobby, you tell Billy, and someone doesn't get the house and there's a fair housing violation. That is, you're accused of that. Okay? And what you have to fall back on is whenever I have multiple offers, I do this. And it's your personal strategy. Okay? Is that what you want to fall back on in case there's a fair housing investigation? Is your personal strategy? Is it following the agency obligations to your seller? So if your agency obligation is to get the seller's approval, does it follow that? Does it treat the sale as a business transaction? Okay. People made offers on the house, and my seller took the offer that had the best situation for them financially and time-wise. So it's a quality decision of the offer. Can you demonstrate that? Does it focus on the property and financing and not the people? These people made the first offer, so we are giving them precedence. There's no requirement for that. Okay, if you say that this is the first offer is the best offer, things that we tell sellers sometimes, is that a strategy? Is it your personal strategy? Does this give the seller the best and the most in the least amount of time? Is it a business decision, or did somebody get squeezed out because of a personal decision that you made? Does it match a company policy? Some of you are agents, some of you may be brokers. Does your company have a policy in terms of how you want to handle multiple offers? And can you make sure that it doesn't potentially violate someone's fair housing rights? Can you treat all people equally under the law? This is more and more going to be a challenge for us as real estate licensees. We have a new disclosure form that's required June 20th, and I'm sure many of you know about that already, but fair housing has become a big issue. So you need to have some sort of a plan for handling multiple offers so you're not exposed to potential violations of fair housing law. So there's options for you to discuss with your seller before you get started. So when that second offer shows up, that you're not panicking, okay? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, do you want me to share the existence of other offers or not share that? It's a decision you get to make. What are the risks of a bidding war? We'll talk about that a little bit. Highest and best. I see people say, oh, we went highest and best. We'll talk about that. Escalation clauses, a quick show of hands, or people using escalation clauses in your market? Yes, no? Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that. Sharing the content of other offers. This came up, I knew I'd deal with it. The content of other offers. Can Lucy tell Billy what's in Bobby's offer and tell Bobby what's in Billy's offer? What's in the content of the offer? Or other offers at all? Darcy, it's time for another poll. Number 9. It's a short one. Okay. All righty. That answers my question. Okay. 86% say that we shouldn't be sharing content. We can't tell Bobby what's in Billy's offer. We can't tell Billy what's in Bobby's offer, and that's all there is to it. Okay? Let's, oops. We're going to do a little exercise now, okay? And because everybody's on screen, take your hands up, put them in front of you. We're not going to pray, okay, but I need you to play along with me. Okay, take your hands, put them together like this, and now fold your hands like you always fold your hands, like you're being stern with a teenager and you just kind of trying to think of what you're going to say that they're not going to make fun of you about, okay? And then you're going to put them back like this, and then we're going to fold them, move them one finger over and fold them the other way, and put your other thumb over the other thumb. And you're going to sit there for a minute and think about how weird that feels. And I imagine that probably feels a little strange for all of you. Would you agree? But at the same time, I'll bet those are the same hands that you've been using most of your life. And you just used them a different way and it felt strange. Okay? So this is one of those areas we're going into. Okay? Standard of Practice 1-13. When entering into a buyer-tenant agreement, realtors must advise potential clients, and I'm going to go right down to number 5 because that's the important one here. The possibility that sellers representatives may not treat the existence, the terms, or conditions of offers as confidential unless confidentiality is required by law, regulation, or any confidentiality agreement between the parties. Now, if you'll notice down here, the date it was adopted was in 1993. So that's been there since 1993. There's some renumbering. There was a minor housekeeping amendment in 2006, but it's been that way since 1993, that there's no requirement for the content, terms, or conditions of the offer, the existence of the offer, to be held confidential by the seller's representative. And that's been there since 1993. So when we talk about in the poll that 86% of you thought that you couldn't share the content, okay, this is what the lay of the land is. It's not unethical to share the content, okay? Now, having said that, I'm not telling you that what you should do is share the content. I'm telling you that you have to do, under obedience to your seller client, you have to do what they ask you to do, and that you have to maintain confidentiality in what the seller allows you to share, but it is not unethical to share the content of competing offers. And it's right in the Code of Ethics, and it's been there for 27 years. My personal experience, I'm throwing this in just because my experience is a lot like yours. I was licensed in 1978. I said, what do we do? I've got two people that wrote offers on the same property. Senior agents said, tell the other agents about the existence because we need to be fair. Remember, this was prior to 1992, and we had to be fair. It was in the Code of Ethics. If it was prior to 1988, we all worked for the sellers, so we were all working for the same person who was selling their house. So we were being fair to other sellers' agents that were all trying to sell the house for our seller client. And to be fair, we wouldn't share the price and terms. That was just the custom. So standard of practice 1-13 tells us it's okay to share the information, and 1-15 tells us with the seller's approval, we can do that.
Hey, Mike,
Go ahead, Darcy.
your last slide, we have a question. Can you explain the unless part of that amendment that was made?
The what part?
Where it says unless.
Okay, unless confidentiality is required by law. So that means if there is some, if attorney-client privilege, that's where that would apply. If it were a governmental function or law enforcement function, if there's a regulation that required confidentiality, okay, and I'm not aware of any regulations that might be outside of the scope of Real Property 12A, or by a confidentiality agreement between parties. So that might mean that a buyer wants to make an offer, but they want to maintain confidentiality. They don't want that information shared with any other party except the seller and the seller's agent. So in that case, a buyer's agent would create a confidentiality agreement and say to the seller and seller's agent, I have an offer for you, but before I present that offer, you need to sign a confidentiality agreement that you won't share the content or the existence of this offer with any other person. So that might occur in situations, and maybe you can think of those. Maybe it's a commercial purchase where people don't want to know that there's a major flag hotel that's going into a resort area, because that will change the dynamics of whatever zoning needs to take place. In my neck of the woods, if Tom Golisano has decided to look for houses in a neighborhood, he doesn't want his name out there as looking in a neighborhood. So there's legitimate reasons for confidentiality. Okay, it may be somebody who wants to pay such a good price that they don't want to create competition, from other big money players. There may be a reason for somebody to ask for confidentiality. So that's that component of it. Does that look like I've answered it, Darcy?
Emily, did that answer your question? Emily Kama?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
And it's still a little confusing overall, but.
Well, if you haven't gone through this in detail, and because I've been teaching this for a while, I know that there's some surprises in here, even for experienced agents. So I kind of anticipated that. That's why some of the poll questions are the way they are. So, like I said, my personal experience is that, agents told me, tell the cooperative agents about the existence of other offers, but don't share the price and terms. Standard of Practice 1-13 says that there's no confidentiality required for the price and terms if the seller dictates that that's okay, and I need the seller's approval to disclose the existence of other offers. So when someone calls me up when I've got an offer on the table and they say, I've got an offer for you on Gemini Circle, are there any other offers? Many people with their personal strategy say, yes, there is, so get it to me as soon as possible, and they try to create this bidding war. If that's my personal strategy and I haven't asked for the seller's permission, I may not be acting in the best interest of the seller, because that second buyer may be the person that says, I don't want to compete. So now I've essentially taken one offer off the table for my seller. And I don't think it's my seller's best interest. So when do we have to disclose when there's an offer? This is a question that comes up about here. Standard of Practice 3-6 tells us realtors shall disclose the existence of accepted offers, including offers with unresolved contingencies, to any broker seeking cooperation. So once there's an acceptance, there's a meeting of the minds, both parties signed on the same agreement, even if there's a laundry list of contingencies, it's an accepted offer, and now we have to disclose it. So I'm going to prove how psychic I am for you, Darcy, because I believe that there have been situations where the board office has been called because someone has a listing that's active in the MLS, it's active, and people are trying to show it, and they've been told that there's an offer that's been accepted, but it's still active in the computer.
Wow, you're good.
I get concerned about how psychic I am at times. So this is Standard of Practice 3-6. We have to disclose the existence. And the simplest way to do that is to change the status in the MLS appropriately when there's an acceptance, even if there's unresolved contingencies. So that means, and I'm not sure what your MLS shows, but under contract means there's an accepted offer. See if there's a status where there's a contract and keep showing, there's options available. And if there's an accepted offer, that's why the status should change immediately, because you're complying with Article 3 of the Code of Ethics. Okay, I have a short break scheduled in here for about 10 minutes. So if any of you want to blank your screen so you can go fill your coffee cup, and remember, this is, as long as your coffee cup is opaque, you can drink anything you want to. We don't care. We're not checking. So, but we're going to take a 10-minute break. Okay? So is your end of the state, we're in the Finger Lakes. Are you guys going to phase 3 soon, or does anybody know?
I don't think we know yet. I think we're speculating a lot.
Yeah, I think it's speculating for us too, but I'm not sure. I know that we got opened up a little bit before Western did, but so just wondering. It's a very different experience. I forgot to mention that if you've been in the business for less than a year, that means that you're already 2 months behind everybody else because we had a pandemic. So people ask me what I've been binge watching. It's been PowerPoints is what I've been binge watching. So
I think a lot of us are in the same boat with you there.
yeah, it's a different environment doing it this way, which is, it's good in some ways, and in other ways I like classroom presentations, and I like going, where people live. I like to visit the places that I teach. So that's part of the fun. So, and I end up with friends in all the places that I teach, so I get to go see my friends. So that's cool. But this is a little harder. So we can meet for lunch, but not in the same place today. So that's
Right. Can we catch up on one question I missed?
Go ahead.
So Ann had asked back when we were talking about disclosing the existence of offers and, what details could be disclosed. She asked, does the buyer get told that his offer will be shared?
Well, they have no expectations of confidentiality. So it depends on who's talking to the buyer. If the buyer's agent is talking to the buyer, they may want to have that discussion and say, listen, there's no reason to expect that they're going to keep it confidential. So they may tell people that we've got an offer and use that to elevate interest by other people. They may say, we like everything about your offer, but this offer over here has this component. And it may be something as simple as, we've got an offer over here that's competing with you, but they're not asking for the appliances. So they might negotiate on that basis, simply disclosing information about what's in a competing offer. And unless there's confidentiality that's required for that seller to see the offer, the buyer has no expectation of that. And I've got a form, if we get that far, that it's a sample form that I can share with you. And I've used that as a counseling form. I've never had a buyer actually use it to create confidentiality, but I've used it as a counseling form. So we'll try to get there on that and see if that helps. Okay. So everybody back, I hope. Again, if you need to have your camera active so your face is visible on the screen, so we know that, for instance, that your German Shepherd is not taking the class for you. Not that, I'm in favor of German Shepherds taking classes too. Interesting fun fact, over 95% of German Shepherds are dogs. and the rest of them are Germans that are shepherds. So, okay, this is where we are. So now everybody knows when they need to disclose. You have to disclose when there's an accepted offer. And the Code of Ethics is very clear about it. You have to disclose when there's an accepted offer. But there's options other than that. And it's accepted offers with unresolved contingencies. So in our state, unresolved contingencies can be attorney's approval. Well, I didn't say anything because we didn't have attorney's approval. It's accepted. That's an unresolved contingency. We didn't get the earnest money deposit yet, okay? I've heard all of these in 40 plus years of real estate. I've heard all of these excuses why somebody didn't disclose that there was an accepted offer or change it in the computer. Well, the home inspection wasn't done yet. They didn't get their mortgage yet, or it's contingent. Now, this is something we need to think about. In your market, if somebody has accepted a contingent offer, typically the listing agent tells us that. So think about this. They're telling us there's an accepted offer, but they're actually sharing some of the content of that offer, that there's a contingent offer. It's subject to the sale of another property. So if the sale of another property is contingent on the sale of another house, as a buyer's agent, what do we ask? Do we ask what price they accepted? And agents won't tell us. Well, I can't tell you that. Well, now we know that they can. So maybe if there's a contingent offer and we need to bump a contingent offer, maybe I could come in with a higher offer. Okay? Where's the contingent property? I don't know if you routinely ask this. It's the content of the offer. The listing agent is giving us information, the content of the offer. Where's the other property? If it turns out it's a very saleable property that's priced properly, it's listed already, and I can see it's going to sell quickly, maybe I'm going to let my buyer know that so that they don't try to pursue something that they can't get. But if it turns out that the contingent property is a 1973 double wide on 5 acres of swamp, you know, that borders Pennsylvania and Ohio and New York, it might not be a great property to, you know, to sell quickly. So maybe we can get in with a better offer. But typically, we're just told there's a contingent offer and we don't ask a lot of details. But we're within our rights to ask, and they may be within their rights to share that information. We do ask how many days are in the bump notice. My neck of the woods, they call it a bump notice. I don't know what they call it, if that's the term that you use locally, but we call it a bump notice. We want to know how long it takes to you know, make an offer and have them bump the other offer out of the way. So when we're talking about the existence or the terms or conditions and the confidentiality, all of these things are possible because the seller doesn't necessarily have to keep these confidential. And I think from looking at some of the discussions that came up in the chats, some of these things are things that typically don't get shared. And some of these behaviors are some things that typically people are not used to. So I'm going to point out that all of this information is in the Code of Ethics. This is nothing new. This is not someone, I'm not somebody from out of state that has different rules and regulations. I'm licensed in New York. It's the only state I've been licensed for real estate in. And these are the rules for all of us.
Mike, I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead.
So when you were talking about if I have an accepted offer and then it's contingent upon the sale of a house.
Mhm.
What if the seller, maybe they took a lower offer, they weren't real happy about it, but they took it, but they don't necessarily, maybe it was 150,000 and they took 125. They
Okay,
don't necessarily want the world to know that 125 was their bottom line.
right.
And somebody says, well, what price did they accept? I don't want to tell them because we're hoping that they come in to bump that offer with 150. Why would I offer that up?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You would never offer that up unless you had the approval of the seller.
Okay.
Just because somebody wants to know doesn't mean they get to know. That's the agency component of making sure that your client is your primary concern and you have confidential information about what they accepted. So I know they accepted 125. I know they weren't happy about it. I will tell people, when we moving forward from we signed this acceptance together, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what do you want me to share with other people? Because I will tell them there's a contingent offer. I have to tell them there's an accepted offer. Do you want me to characterize that it's contingent and they're still looking at other offers? And if they say yes, that's what you do. If you need to be prepared that people may ask you what the purchase price was. And so this is something you discuss with the seller. Do you want me to disclose the purchase price? And if the answer is no, the answer is no. I wouldn't offer it up.
Okay. And then now with the knowledge that we all got that the seller can authorize the listing agent to tell other people what offers are that are on the table, would a buyer's agent just write, when I'm writing up the offer, get a confidentiality agreement signed from the buyers at that point so that when they present the offer, say, here's the deal, here's my offer, but I want it held confidential so that they cannot disclose what that amount is?
Well, that's an agreement then between the buyer and the seller not to share that information. So if the seller wants to see the offer, they'll agree not to share it. So let's say there's 3 offers on the table and one of them has a confidentiality agreement. That means that the other 2 are still fair game. It means if the seller could authorize sharing of information for those other 2. And I don't think if you have the freedom and the instructions to tell the first 2 agents that there's competing offers, you don't have to tell them how many. That's confidential between you and the seller. Because there's 3, but one of them is confidential, so there's still competing offers. Strategically, with you and the seller, it would make sense to agree not to disclose the number of offers.
Strategically, I would say, and anybody can disagree with me, but more times than not, you get a better price when there's multiple offers versus people walking away. I find people walking away less because there's multiple offers. It's the atmosphere that we're in right now, and people up their offers, and it's better for the seller.
And I agree with you in the current market. And the concern I have is this is a multiple offer class for all markets. And the concern is at some point it's going to stop being a seller's market. Now, I can look at all the economic forecasts. I can look at the new housing starts, the population, the jobs, all of those things tell me it's going to continue to be a seller's market for a while. But at some point it will stop being a seller's market. It may switch to a neutral market. It may switch to a buyer's market overnight, which is what happened when the banks crashed in 2008. We went from a rampant seller's market to a buyer's market overnight because sellers were trying to bail out of things that they had over leveraged themselves into. So it switched overnight. The most important thing is, though, when it changes and it goes from a seller's market to a buyer's market, Darcy, how does CCBR announce that? Is that something in the MLS? Does it just show up and just announce, oh, we've switched, it's now a buyer's market? There's an announcement that comes out when you sign into the MLS. There's a buyer's market announcement. No, you don't know. But what I'm saying is, if I'm working for a seller and I have the opportunity to keep my mouth shut and have the seller see two offers instead of sharing information and potentially having one buyer back away or two buyers back away, keeping my mouth shut might be a really good idea. And it might not be that it's a buyer's market. It might be that it's still a seller's market, but one of the buyers is taking advice from multiple relatives, and they're maybe even telling them about better houses that they should look at. It may be that somebody has really had a credibility issue with their agent. We haven't talked about that much, but as agents, whenever we are constantly going back to buyers saying, I thought we were okay, but gosh, there's other offers, we're in a competing situation, you may want to raise your price again. And the third, fourth, fifth time that happens, you get some fatigue from the buyers, and it shows up in our credibility. So I can't say that it won't happen in a seller's market, okay? But it's up to you. You can do anything you want to. You can change the way you're doing things. You can do things the way, you can change it a little, you can change it a lot. I'm just presenting you with some of the basic rules as they appear in the Code of Ethics so that you know what the lay of the land is. So you don't have to change anything. Okay, but we are back to being fair. Other agents are going to tell me I need to be fair. This is all nice and good in a classroom, but there's 50 people in the class, so that means that there's 350 that weren't in the class and they don't know what the rules are, but I need to be fair. So I need to share information because of the market I work in.
Please. What are you on about, Katie? Go to the pub with Daddy. Go and see Lola or Joanne. Please. You're not going to the pub. Why? Because you're a child. Yeah, but I went a couple of times, Mom. Not at night time. You're only little. I'm 6. Why can I not go to the pub? Older kids get to go to the pub, and then I don't get to go to the pub. Remember, it was Scobie's party, and it was too late, and I had to go to bed, and Millie and Tony, I had to stay up at home. Millie and Tony got to go to the pub. But it was their daddy's party, though. Yeah, but did I get to go? And I didn't get to play, or I only had to stay at home listening. Who's minding me? Why can you not let me just go for one night? Because you're too little to go to the pub. Mommy, I'm 6. 6. I am absolutely just 6. Yeah, exactly. You're 6. Not 16, not 17, not 18. You're 6. And Millie's 6. She got to go to the pub for her daddy's birthday party. And did I get to go? No. Well then, why do I not get to go to the cat and spend time with my auntie? It's my weekend off. What about if other kids are going? Please, I just one night. I won't go to the bingo anymore. I won't go to the bingo tomorrow. Okay, I'm trying to go to Ida. Yeah, but I don't care. I'm just asking you. What did Daddy say to all this? He's ignoring me. He's on his phone. What? He's giving out to me. He's shouting at me. I'm trying to talk to him.
Maybe because you're doing his head in.
I'm not doing his head, and I've tried to tell him something, and he's being mean to me. All the time when you're gone, he thinks he gets his own way and everything. He thinks that he can go on his phone, and he thinks that he doesn't have to spend time with me, and he thinks that he pretends he's cleaning when you're gone, and he doesn't really clean. I go into the kitchen because I'm hungry, and then he's on his phone and says, I'm cleaning. I said, no, you're not. You're on your phone. And like, seriously, guys, you believe me? I'm 6 and my own mother won't let me go to the pub. How is that so fair? I'm 6 and a half. I'm not allowed to go to the pub. My mother won't let me. Why my mother won't let me?
I'm sure Katie's going to get to go to the pub sometime. But you have no obligations to be fair when it conflicts with your old car obligations and duties, okay? We want to get along with everybody, and you may have to practice answering people with things that they don't want to hear. And it may be, I'm not allowed to share the information about other offers based on the decisions of my client. Fair as in fair and honest to customers means you're being helpful without disclosing confidential information. So that's confidential information if there are offers or if there's the content of those offers. That's confidential information. They don't get that because you can't disclose confidential information. Being fair might just mean that not everybody gets to go to the pub. Does it really matter if we share information about the offers that are on the table? Am I really making a big deal about this? Well, old car obligations are duties, and that means we must provide them to clients. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accountability, reasonable care are obligations. There's no way around it. We must provide those. The C's for confidentiality. If we start to provide confidential information, there's 2 other offers to parties other than our clients. What have we done? It's undisclosed dual agency. You've made the other party that you're sharing information with a client. When you provide client level services to a customer, you are treating them as a client. You're making them a client. It's undisclosed dual agency, and it's a violation of license law. 43% of all the investigations that the Department of State does year in and year out are misapplications of agency. And undisclosed dual agency comes up quite often because people have shared confidential information or acted on behalf of another party in the transaction and lost track of who their client is. So it does matter if you share this information. So timeline, just to go back, until 1988, we all worked for the seller, okay? And before 1992, written agency disclosure wasn't required. Because it wasn't required, people didn't talk about agency. We always worked for the seller. We always worked for the seller. And even during that 4-year period, from 1988 to 1992, people always worked for the seller because they didn't realize what the change in the multiple listing service meant. Until 1993, we were obligated to be fair to all parties. Code of Ethics said, be fair to everyone. Don't take unfair advantage. And then that came out and people didn't notice it. Because, well, we weren't required to take ethics classes every 2 years or every 3 years as it is now. As of 2020, right now, where we are right now, we have a unilateral offering of cooperation and compensation, which means that when someone puts a listing into the multiple listing service, the default perception is that whoever brings in a buyer is working for that buyer. It's going to be pretty unusual for them to be a sub-agent now. We're solely working for the best interests of our clients. Article 1 tells us we're working for our clients and their best interest is the most important thing. And we have to be honest to all parties. Honest means there's an offer that's accepted. And honest means when someone says, are there any offers? We're in a position to look at all offers. Well, are there any offers? We're in a position to look at all offers. If you're uncomfortable answering people with that, you may want to practice it. You may also want to listen to attorneys. Attorneys are really good at managing client-attorney privilege, and they will answer you with as little information as possible because they don't want to share anything that is potentially harmful to their client. So they will answer questions that way and say, we're in a position to look at all offers. If you have an offer, make it. Send it over. I'll get it presented as quickly as possible. And you have to do that very confidently. And at some point, you'll recognize the value in it because your client will then get to decide how many offers are really on the table, instead of chasing them away by sharing information that's confidential. Short discussion, okay? To share or not to share. We've talked about that. You can decide what's better with your seller. So when do you want to have this discussion with your seller client? Anyone want to blurt that out?
When you're on your listing. When you're listing, yeah.
Yeah, I would say right at the listing is the time to do that. Here's how we're going to handle showings. Here's how we're going to handle radon tests. Because do you have radon? Well, you do a radon test and it's 85 degrees and 100% humidity out and you don't have air conditioning. You need the radon test done and you need the house closed up. So let's talk about that. Okay. By the way, let's talk about what happens if there's more than one offer. What kind of choices do you give them? I can share the information. I cannot share the information. It's your decision. And certainly they will ask you, Donna, you're an expert at this. What do you want? What do you think we should do? Share your opinion. Tell them what could happen. Okay. And work accordingly. How do you document it? Okay, they're going to make decisions about whether you can share that information or not. I've got a form which may or may not help you, so you want to document the decisions. Everything that's in the listing contract, in the MLS sheet, you know, about showings and things like that, those are all, that's your documentation of your conversation, so you'll want to document that. Some of these strategies, what might be some risks in a bidding war?
I have a little experience with that one, if I can add in.
Go ahead.
I just been dealing with clients. They've given multiple offers, 3 homes recently, and you know, sometimes you can deal with clients who need to move really quick. So if there's any delayed negotiations and multiple offers coming in, they might simply just choose not to pursue those because of timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They'll just say, I don't even want to make an offer. Yeah. It's not a matter of rescinding an offer. It's a matter of saying, I just don't want to fight over a house. And that's personalities. And that's not unusual. What about appraisal issues? Let's say somebody got in a multiple offer situation. There were lots of information shared back and forth. And now it's, well, let's just say right now, it's the 10th of June. You go to contract, the appraisal gets ordered by the 30th of June. And the appraiser can use the last 6 months' sales. How many sales took place in your market from the 1st of January to the end of March? Well, it was winter. I know it was winter there because it was winter here. How many sales took place from the 1st of April to the end of June? We were on lockdown. What will they be able to use for comparables? Is it possible that depending on the time of year, and this year is a little unusual, but if you have an offer and the appraiser's working at the end of March, they're working on 6 months starting in October to the end of March. The house might not appraise, is what I'm saying, because there might not be enough comps for it. Okay, so you might run into an appraisal issue. What about inspection issues? If you've got an emotional buyer who paid more than anyone else, and now the home inspection gets done, might the buyer have a different attitude about a home inspection on a used house if they got what they feel was a good buy versus that they paid more than top dollar? How are they going to respond to the home inspection? Okay, is that possibly the home inspection going to blow up the transaction because the more money they pay, the more perfect they expect the house to be? So you need to think about that. The financial issues, maybe it appraises, maybe they paid a lot more than they wanted to, and now they're financially stressed, so that going into the latter part of the mortgage process, the transmission goes out on their car. Now they have to dip into their savings so that they have vehicles so they can go to work. And the financial stress is more than they can handle, and they can't complete the transaction. So those are some of the negative factors in a bidding war, okay? And if everything's perfect and if everything is a seller's market, that's fine, that's great. But we have to be honest and we have to be aware of these things, and some markets will change. Highest and best. I don't know how many people are using highest and best. I have encountered that, and I have my opinions about it. Here's a book that's handy to have in any real estate office. There are real estate editions of Black's Law Dictionary. Here's the reason I'm bringing up Black's Law Dictionary, is if you look in Black's Law Dictionary and you look up confidentiality, obedience, disclosure, reasonable care, contingent, meeting of the minds, there's definitions for all of those in Black's Law Dictionary. So that means that there's attorneys and judges that look at that as a reference and say, okay, this is real. And guess what is not in Black's Law Dictionary? Highest and best. So if you use highest and best, and this is your personal strategy, whose rules and policies are you using? They're not in Black's Law Dictionary, so you can't fall back on you may be falling back on this is what we've always done. This is what I've always done. What's your personal strategy? Is it your broker's? Is it your own? Do you have a policy for this? Okay, because what if somebody doesn't get the house and they think they should have, and you didn't handle the highest and best process to their liking? Are they in writing? Where are your rules? Court decisions, by the way, put the most weight on highest. So their suggestion from some attorneys is consider using highest and or best, because if you just use highest and best and someone makes an offer and I'll pay $1 million for your house and I'll pay you $1 a week for 1,000,000 weeks, that's the highest price. That's defensible in court. And it may not sell the house to that person, but it may tie the house up in potential litigation, so it scares other buyers away, and it's a real unpleasant situation for your seller. So think very carefully about highest and best. And my suggestion would be get really good at analyzing the seller proceeds and the needs of your client and the benefits of any particular offer, because no offer is identical to other offers. Okay, even if it's the same financing and the same price and the same terms, you have different buyers. You have to analyze what they bring to the table. And if there's different offers with different bottom lines, that's something else you need to be able to analyze. But to simply throw everything back and say we're going highest and best and hoping that that's a one size fits all, that may not be the most professional way to address this. Escalation clauses should be 4 parts. These are the recommendations I've received from attorneys in multiple seminars and workshops. Typically, you'll see this, and you want to see a minimum of 4 parts. Buyer will pay X dollars more than the next highest offer. Okay? Up to a price not to exceed X, whatever that amount is, because everybody's got a limit. The buyers that are financing the property have a maximum amount that they can finance, and maybe a maximum amount of dollars that they can add in on top of the price if necessary. A cash buyer has limited amounts of cash. Even Bill Gates has limits. Okay? They're higher than ours, but he has limits. Subject to receiving a copy of the competing next highest offer. Now, if you've been seeing a lot of escalation clauses, most of them have this in it. So it's pretty clear that actually, without realizing it, you've probably been sharing the contents of other offers anyway, because this is a typical requirement, is we want to know what we're really competing against. And then the offer expires as of a certain date. If you're a buyer's agent and you're writing an escalation clause without an expiration date, you are putting your buyer at risk for buying a property at a time in the future when maybe there's only 2 offers left on the table, and now they're not interested in buying that house because they're committed to another one. So you need to have the expiration date on that. This is a frequently asked question that I get, and I don't know if this is showing up in the questions at all, Darcy, but what if there's more than one offer that has an escalation clause? We've got 5 offers on the table, 3 of them have escalation clause. This will go $5,000 more, this will go $2,000 more, but they've got a higher ceiling. What do we do? And I like to ask smart people questions, and smart people say that just because you use an escalation clause, they ask you to, doesn't mean you have to. You can ignore the escalation clause and just look at the pre-qualifying letter from the buyer, their cash capacity to buy. You can look at all the other factors, set the escalation clause aside, and just make a counteroffer to them. It's that simple. You don't have to play the escalation clause game just because somebody asks you to.
Mike,
Yes.
should the escalation clause have a date even when the contract has an expiration on it itself?
I'm bringing that up because not every contract that's in use in New York has an expiration date on it, believe it or not. Greater Syracuse is and one area where their local contracts don't have an expiration on it. There is no life of the offer. The agents take the position there that if the life of the offer is important, you put it in.
In Erie County, they leave it blank.
They have the clause and they leave it blank.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
you know, there's a date, but it's
Yeah.
often blank on the Erie County contract.
Yeah, well, that's why I try to get some sense of local customs, and I've been, around the state in different areas to find out what some of them are, but yeah, there's always little wrinkles along the way. So that's why I said the escalation clause should definitely have an expiration date, and the offer may or may not. So, but good question.
So if you don't have a date in there, and they accept it a week later and those buyers have already gone out and bought another house, how does that work?
Well, if the buyers, as a buyer's agent, my obligation to my buyers is to make sure they get the house they want. So if they've got an offer with an escalation clause that's just out there and they're going to pursue other houses, I'm going to ask them to write a document to rescind their offer that they have an escalation clause. I'm going to make sure they're going in clean to another transaction. So that falls on me as a buyer's agent to protect their interests, because most people can't, buy two houses at the same time, or it certainly would inconvenience them. So yeah, that falls on me as the buyer's agent.
Can we go back to that highest and best? Usually when we say that to an agent. Say I have a listing and they've got an offer, I ask them to make it, let them know there's multiple offers and make it their highest and best.
Well,
it's different than
that's
saying you're going to accept, a lister saying you're going to accept the highest or best.
And that's again, there's different ways that agents can handle it, because there's literally no rules. So if there's no rules for it, everybody is flying by the seat of their pants. And if you're just saying, okay, there's multiple offers, and so just come back to us with your highest and best. To me, that sounds like a verbal counteroffer for starters, and that doesn't match up with Article 9. But however you do that, if you tell one agent that or 10 agents that, you're inventing some sort of highest and best process, and you may be at risk. Worst case scenario, you tell 5 agents that you're going highest and best, and the deadline that you've established passes and nobody's come back. And you're sitting there with your seller and you've chased away 5 buyers by going highest and best. May not be the best strategy. Does it happen? It happens. It happens rarely that you go from 5 to 0, but the possibility exists. You're giving up control by saying, okay, I'm sharing information with all of you, and some buyers are going to simply say, I don't want to play anymore.
So do you think, like in Buffalo, they always put, they list something on Monday, they're going to present offers on Saturday or something, put that in the listing, that if you're going to have an offer?
Well, remember, a buyer can make any offer they want to at any time. So because the listing agent has sat down with the seller and strategized, we're going to do it this way, it doesn't mean that the buyer is under any obligation to cooperate with that. They can say, I need to make a decision by Wednesday, so I'm going to make an offer today on Monday, and if they don't give me an answer on Wednesday, they're walking away from me. That's fine if someone else buys the house. And if no one else buys the house, then maybe it wasn't the best advice, and that could certainly cause some credibility issues with the seller and the seller's agent. So, and
that's not a good idea.
I know some of this, many of you are sitting comfortably in your home where, I understand that, and you're saying, well, that has never happened to me, so it's unlikely to happen. And you may have heard of something they call turkey logic, okay? A turkey is in a farm, and there's human beings that come by every day and make sure that there's water and food and the companionship of other turkeys, and if there's antibiotics in the food so they don't get sick. And clearly the turkey realizes that turkeys are the most important being in the universe, because here's a whole system in place for us to grow and flourish. And every day the turkey wakes up and it's the most important being in the universe. And they're always right about that until the day before Thanksgiving. So it's turkey logic for us to say, this has never happened to me, so it never will. So that's where I'm coming from on some of this. You need to know what the possibilities are. Some of them are more likely at some times than others, but if you're in a rampant buyer's market, things will be 180 degrees from where you are now, and I want you to be ready for that too. Sharing the content of other offers, we know that it's not unethical to share the content, especially if there's no confidentiality agreement, if the client directs you to share it, okay? You need the direction and approval of the client to share that information. And this is C, okay?
Excuse me, that's where my question would be, is where do I document I have the approval or I don't have the approval of my seller?
Okay, and that's one of these slides that I did not open up before I started, and I'm going to get there right now. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. Sorry about this disorderly screen sharing. Here we go. And okay. This is a form, and I've got 2 other forms for you. And I will send these to Darcy so she can send them to you. They will say sample across the front of them because these are not official board forms. If you're an agent, you would need to have it approved by your broker. If you're a broker, you should have it reviewed with your legal counsel. But these are some sample forms, and so they're not approved, but it gives you an idea of what's going on. So as a dealing with confidentiality, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong form. Here we go. This is the form that I was just asked about, okay? This is sitting down with the seller, and the seller acknowledges that I've talked to them about the possibility of more than one offer. And the agent has reviewed the agency responsibilities. Okay, what are the agency responsibilities? I'm a seller's agent, so I'm the eyes and ears of the seller in your absence. So that means if a buyer tells me that they love the house, they think it's worth every penny we're asking, but they're going to make a low offer to see how far they come down, I don't tell the seller that I'm the greatest negotiator in the world and I can get the buyer to come up. I tell the seller what I heard and what I saw, just as if they were standing there. So that's agency responsibilities. We talk about very briefly about old car obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accountability, and reasonable care. It's all in that agency disclosure form that we have them sign when we list the property, correct? Okay, so that's not a big surprise. What are the requirements regarding offers in Real Property Law 12A? Any idea? I did the homework when I wrote this course. I figured that would be the best place to start. What it says in Real Property Law 12A is all offers must be presented. That's what it says. It does imply in one place that any buyer can make any offer they care to, but that's all it says in the Real Property Law. The Code of Ethics, we now know, tells us that we need the approval of the seller to share the existence or content of other offers. And I can't do that without your approval. I can't just come up with my own strategy. And we also know that unless a buyer asks us for confidentiality, we can share the content of any offer that's submitted to us. So we can do all of this right here in this paragraph, we've already reviewed agency responsibilities with the agency disclosure form, the requirements of New York State real property law, all offers must be presented, and then we can talk very briefly about their approval to share information about offers. So that doesn't take very long. The sellers determined that the listing agent may or may not give out information regarding the existence of other unaccepted offers during the course of the listing period or any subsequent transactions. They decide if I may or may not, and they initial it. The sellers determine that the listing agent may or may not divulge the content of any existing offers, and they initial that. This form may be superseded at the direction of the seller, but the agent will be held harmless for information distributed under 1 or 2 above prior to the date such permission to disclose is revoked. What that means very simply is the seller tells me I can't share the existence of other offers. We have 2 offers on the table. They would really like to accept one, but it's lower than the other one. So now they tell me, okay, we're going to do a counter offer to the one that we would rather accept, except we want it at a higher price. You may now tell them that they are competing, and you may tell them that they're competing with a higher offer. Okay, so they can change this at any time. Do you see how that would work? Strategically, we've made sure that my seller has seen all the offers, and now strategically we're going to use the existence of other offers to my seller's advantage. Does that make sense? And the other way, if the seller says, no, I want you to tell everybody that there's offers, I want people fighting over my house, it's the best house on the block, I want you to tell people, and then we tell people that there's other offers, and we go from 2 offers to 0. And they say, well, that didn't work the way we thought it would. Well, the market's changed a little bit. It may be the personalities of the buyer. Do you want me to keep telling people about offers? They can change that. And it also means that they can change that, and you're not going to have a problem. You're not going to get sued because you chased away 2 buyers. Okay?
How long do you wait? I mean, because, you know, there's showings, and if you get an offer, and
How long do you wait for what?
for other agents, if you know, like say one agent gets an offer, and now, you know, you've got the rest of the week yet that there's some appointments. You present what you have when you have it, and you don't wait.
Yeah, Article 1 and Standard Practice 1-7 says we must present all offers as quickly as possible. So you don't hang on to an offer.
No.
You present it as quickly as possible. You're obligated under the Code of Ethics. So now, if the seller wants to wait because they want to see if something else happens, that's fine. But I typically see that it's not sellers that want to wait, but it's agents that are trying to manipulate the transaction and make decisions for the seller. We're not decision makers. We're a conduit for information. The sellers, the buyers and sellers, are the decision makers. So we can't stand in their place to make decisions. We're obligated to present all offers as quickly as possible. So that has to happen. Okay, so getting back to this one. Yeah.
So if you put in your listing, Mike, you list it on Monday and you say all offers will be presented on Saturday, and somebody brings an offer in on Monday, maybe you have an agent that says, I'm not presenting it until Saturday because that's what the seller said. That's their strategy.
Yep. Then I want to see that statement in writing from the seller, because the seller's not required to follow the Code of Ethics. But as an agent for my buyer, I am required to, you know, do everything I can for them. So I want to know that it's the seller who's made that determination that they're not going to consider this offer, and not the agent.
Okay, because my offer is good until Monday night at midnight, but
Yep.
you're saying you're not doing anything till Saturday.
Right.
have to tell that seller,
They have to present all offers. Real property law says they have to present all offers. Code of Ethics say they have to present it as quickly as possible. If the seller says, I don't want to see any offers until Saturday, I want the seller to say that in writing. Okay? Because otherwise, I am potentially at risk for violating the law. And if that also means that the listing agent may potentially be violating the law and the code of ethics. How do we know that's the seller's position? If they've got that in writing, I'll share that with my buyer.
So the buying agent has the right to ask for it then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And the seller, if he gets an offer on Monday, although we had put it in and discussed about waiting till Saturday, he can take that offer on Monday. And then
the seller's a decision maker. They can change their mind.
And then the other agents can get mad at us.
As long, there's some of these things that certainly the form that I just showed you that says I can or can't share information, I can take that and I can post that in the MLS with my listing. People say, wait a minute, why aren't you telling me if there's competing offers? I don't have that permission. It's right here. Here's the seller's statement with their signatures, the address, the date it was listed, their initials. That's it. I don't have permission to share it with you. If you have an offer, give it to me. I'll present it as quickly as possible. And believe it or not, I had problems with agents the first time I started to do it. And now in my area, they're used to it.
So they should just get their offers and they shouldn't wait till Saturday. If they're going to have an offer, they should get it in right away.
Well, that's a specific situation, okay? That's not what I'm talking about. That's a manipulative technique that has evolved, and it's okay for one agent, for one seller. What I would say is many of us have been in the business a long time, and we do a lot of our business based on repeat business. So if the buyer who ends up with that property feels jerked around, and now 5 years later it's time to sell the house, are they as likely to call a realtor the next time? Are they likely to call, the agent that helped them? If they felt jerked around, it's like Maya Angelou said, people may forget what you've done, but they won't forget how you made them feel. That's a good way to make one sale and then alienate part of the market, especially the people that didn't get the house. They're alienated too. So I don't think that's necessarily the best service for the public. So, but anyway, got to keep moving here. So at the time of listing a property, decide to disclose or not the existence of other offers. Decide to disclose the content or not. You and the client decide this, okay? Have a uniform plan for handling all offers the same. As we get into more fair housing disclosures and more awareness of fair housing, you need to have something you can document and prove that you're doing it consistently. And you need to do it in writing. Strategies for a buyer's agent, this comes up quite often in this class, is what can I do? I've got the buyers, I want to win. Okay? I can't tell you something that's going to win every time. All I'm going to tell you is some things that may help you hedge your bets a little bit. Okay? One of them is the earnest money deposit. And I know in your market, I know in my market, there's fewer of them, but there's $100,000 houses. And I use $100,000 houses because I like round numbers, especially when I'm doing a Zoom webinar. So if you've got a $100,000 house that would go FHA, will there be a lot of demand for it in your market? Yes, no? Anyone want to volunteer, or am I guessing the market wrong? Okay, yes? Okay. Now, because sellers are not in a position where they have to give away sellers' concessions, and they're not paying a lot of buyers' closing costs without the price going up, if somebody doesn't want to ask for concessions and it's a $100,000 house and it's FHA, the down payment then is 3.5%, which is $3,500. And what are the taxes likely to be on a $100,000 house in your market? Is $4,000 realistic? 5, okay. So 5, so we're up to 8,500. We've got a year's taxes and insurance. Is that likely to come to be $10,000 or more that the buyer's going to have access to for an FHA purchase at 100,000? Okay. So what is the typical earnest money deposit on an FHA offer on a $100,000 house in your experience? $1,000, $500 to $1,000. Does that resonate with most people? Okay. If you need $10,000 in your control as a buyer, and you're making a deposit to make sure that you get the house, and you know you're going to be competing with it with other buyers for it because it's desirable, because it's financeable, it's within the reach of a lot of people, why wouldn't you use a larger deposit? Because you can offer the same as the other people you're competing with, but if you have a $5,000 deposit, won't that stand out when you're making a competing offer? And I know it's a comfort factor. We're not used to asking people that are FHA buyers a modest means kind of situation. We're not used to asking them for $5,000. But is their deposit at risk? What's the chances they're going to lose their deposit? If they don't get the mortgage, do they get their deposit back? Yes, they do. If they can't come to terms on the home inspection, are they going to get their deposit back? Yes, they will. If the seller can't provide clear title, or if the septic system's shot and they can't afford to fix the septic system, is the buyer going to get their deposit back? The answer is yes. The only reason they wouldn't get their deposit back is if they said, no, we're going to live in this crappy apartment the rest of our lives and we're just going to walk away from $5,000. So just a suggestion that if you have a bigger deposit, you look that much more serious to a seller, even though it's quite possible that the offer is going to be the same as a lot of the other offers in that price category. That's something that I have seen work numerous times. And again, that it's not at risk unless the buyer changes their mind. So just a suggestion there. Is it a significant amount? Is it non-refundable? Okay. Let's say you have a contingent offer and you want the sellers to accept it, but you haven't got your house sold yet. So you ask them, you offer them a deposit and you ask for 60 days to sell your house. And if you don't have it sold after 30 days, some of that deposit is non-refundable. So even if we don't get the house, you, Mr. Seller, get to keep $2,000, $3,000. Make some of that non-refundable. That may get the seller to pay attention to your offer and keep you in the game long enough so that you can do what you need to do. Doesn't fit all situations, doesn't fit all markets, but it's something that is a possibility that you might be able to do. Pre-qualification versus pre-approval. I know that most of us know that there's a difference, what I've started to see, and I thought after the banks blew up and there were fewer lenders out there and they were enforcing Dodd-Frank, Dodd-Frank says that a pre-qualification letter basically has to state that it's a pre-qualification, and it means that credit has been pulled, that's in file, and there's no other verification. A pre-approval, according to Dodd-Frank, means that the employment has been verified, the assets have been verified, the income has been verified, and that a tri-merge credit has been pulled, and that basically the mortgage application is complete except for an address to send an appraiser to. The buyer will probably have to put some money up front. They will have to pay for an application, they'll have to pay for their credit, and they'll have to pay an amount so that the appraiser will be paid when they identify the property. But it's a little extra work to get your buyer in place, but it also means that they feel a clock ticking. They feel more pressure to make a decision. So they're a little bit more cooperative. They're more likely to make themselves available to see a house when it jumps onto the market. As a seller's agent, I want to deal with somebody that's got a legitimate pre-approval. My concern is there's a lot of banks out there that are labeling documents as pre-approvals, and they don't have the full credit background. They don't have the asset verification. So that's something that we need to be better at reading as sellers agents. Does your contract, does it talk about having proof of funds if they make a cash offer? Anyone? Okay.
No, it doesn't say, but we usually ask for it.
Okay.
The cash offer.
All right, because there's some local contracts that that specify the proof of funds in any time there's a cash offer. So it's certainly due diligence that if somebody's making a cash offer, to protect your seller, you want them to provide proof. Okay. So that's my concern, is not only is it a cash offer, I want to see evidence of the offer. And as a buyer's agent, I'm going to make sure if my buyer's a buyer, is a cash buyer, I'm going to make sure that proof of funds comes with that offer. Here's the other thing that you need to be aware of, and this is one of the things that jumped out at me as we started dealing with the COVID-19. When we started dealing with COVID-19, one of the things that happened was the stock market dropped, and it dropped big. A lot of people don't keep their cash as cash, okay? They've got mutual funds, they have investments, and so it's one thing to bring proof of funds with an offer that says you've got this many dollars in a Vanguard mutual fund. But if the statement is the 31st of March, that Vanguard fund's value may have changed on the 10th of June. It also means that if you present proof of funds on the 10th of June, I don't know what's going to happen to the stock market for the next 30 to 40 days while everything else gets taken care of, so you can close a transaction, a cash transaction. What if we get 10 days down the road and the stock market drops again, and now they don't have enough cash, and now they start dragging their feet in order to close, waiting for the stock market to rebound? What if they had the cash at the time they made the offer and now they don't? It's one of those things that you need to look at in terms of the form of cash. If it's in equities, as a seller's agent, we may recommend that the buyer convert their investment to liquid funds as soon as the home inspection is signed off on. Okay? we'll do the home inspection, but as soon as we do that, you need to liquidate the funds within 5 days so that we know you have the cash to close. We don't want you waiting for the stock market to recover before you close on the transaction. Okay, so this is a new threat that has emerged as a result of COVID-19. Some markets, you end up with inspections, people dropping inspections. I find that really difficult to accept as a buyer's agent. It takes a very special buyer to go in knowing, feeling comfortable with, somebody else's house and not being worried about it. I might ask for the buyer to do an inspection solely for information. Okay, so they know what to budget for when they own the house. And if they choose to do no inspection at all, I'm going to make sure that I use the form that my company's attorneys have come up with so that I'm not going to get sued about the condition of the house. So that's a high risk maneuver. It's up to you. Closing date conversation. I know a lot of agents will show a house and then send me an offer and have no conversation with me at all about what the needs of the buyer are or the needs of the seller are. And I try to have this conversation with a listing agent, because what if it's a vacant house? Is it a vacant house? What's going on with that? Where's the seller going? What are they doing? Well, they're building a house. Okay. Well, if they're building a house, and when's it going to be done? Well, they're telling us 120 days, but of course that's based on weather, so it might be 150 days. So it's the 10th of June, so it might be mid-November. Okay. My buyers who want to make an offer on your house and they know they're going to be competing with everyone else are in a rental and they're month to month. They can stay where they are. They can close in 60 days and they can rent the house back to the sellers at their cost. So the sellers don't have to move until their new house is ready. I don't know what it costs to move twice, but your seller can calculate that, because otherwise you're going to have people telling you that, okay, we'll buy your house, but you have to move out in 60 days, which means you're going to have to move twice. You're going to have to find interim housing. They may or may not have thought about it, but my buyers may not pay more for the property, but they'll pay a fair price and you only have to move once. So that may be something to consider. Post-possession situation. It may be a vacant house and we're entering into a Western New York winter and my people are good. They've got a mortgage commitment. Let them move in a few weeks early. They'll take over the utilities and the snow plowing and the house won't freeze and your insurance won't be canceled for a vacant house with frozen pipes. So those are some things to do for maybe, giving your buyer a chance to win the competition. So that's what I have for you. We have a few minutes left, so we can do some questions. If someone wants to say something, or Darcy, are there any things on the chat that come up that you'd like me to deal with?
A lot of them that I didn't read, I kind of felt that you had answered during your conversation. So anyone that asked them that you didn't get an answer, please feel free to unmute yourself. The last one we have on here had to do still with the escalation clause. And she said, if you have an expiration on the contract that has not yet expired and no one decided to raise their offer, wouldn't their offer be still an offer on the table, even if the agent verbally said highest and or best offer verbally?
Okay, that's a lot of what ifs. And I can understand, thinking that way. My question is, there's really no reason to do verbal anything. It's a loophole in the real property law that says that verbal agreements are binding, but the problem is enforcing them. Article 9 takes a higher standard than real property law when it comes to doing everything in writing, and it's very clear. Everything has to be done in writing. So my suggestion is escalation clauses are cute. They come up about every 10 years or so in the market, and it's an interesting strategy, but it really doesn't amount to anything because it's not a requirement. It doesn't appear in Black's Law Dictionary. My suggestion is analyze the offers that are on the table for the seller, discuss with the seller which one is in the best interest, and then counter with a straightforward document that says, we want you to pay this much, and this is when we want you to pay it, and this is when the closing date is, and here's the inspections and financing you can do. End of story. You don't have to play the escalation game. It's really not much more than a gimmick. Anything else? Well, thanks for letting me spend time with you today. I hope you got what you came for. You do need to sign out in the chat room. Is there any other housekeeping we need to take care of, Darcy?
No, that's the only thing. If everyone will just type their name again. And then I had some quick thank yous as well. I do want to thank everybody that participated today. The more participants that we get, hopefully the more of these we can do in the future. And I really want to thank Mike for doing this with us. We had hopes of physically getting him here. He's been very flexible with his schedule. This is our third rescheduling of this, and I thought he did an awesome job, so thank you, Mike. And I do want to thank our board of directors as well for allowing us to do this for you guys for CE credit at no cost. So I thought that was awesome that they were willing to do that for us. And that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. I'll stick around for a minute, but whenever you want to end the meeting, Darcy, you can do that. And thanks very much for having me. And, I will send you those forms, and the forms that I have, there's a confidentiality agreement. There's also a seller's net sheet that has 3 columns on it, so you can compare up to 3 offers on the same page, and that's useful in some cases. So, okay.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, I had a situation where I had a buyer who had gotten the mortgage commitment, had put the good faith deposit down. They had a closing date set. It all rolled past the closing date. It was about a month and a half past the original closing date, and the lender kept saying, we need another T crossed, we need another I dotted. The long and the short was the deal fell through, and my buyer was told they could not get their good faith deposit back. Luckily, it wasn't $5,000, but we talked to lawyers, and they said, yes, there was nothing in there that said that they got their deposit back. And as an agent, I disagreed with it, but I mean, a lawyer overruled what I thought.
Sure. Well, without knowing the details of the contract, if the buyer is making a good effort, a good faith effort to secure the mortgage, okay, and one of the triggers is the mortgage commitment date, and that is construed as a hard date in New York. So the seller had the option at that point of canceling it because they may not have received a commitment. But if the buyer received a commitment and then didn't take other steps that the bank needed them to do, because getting the commitment is one thing, the buyer has to sign the commitment. And then typically, especially because of the way the closings have come about with Dodd-Frank, is they may have to provide additional information about their finances right up to day of closing. If they don't do that because they can't or they won't, then the seller has fulfilled their part of the contract and the buyer has not. You know, they've got a mortgage commitment, but they still got to show up with financing. So if it's to some degree the fault of the buyer that they didn't receive the funding after they received the commitment, then their deposit may be at risk. They've got to do everything they need to do. Same thing with the seller. If the seller can't do everything they need to, like provide, water supply with no bacteria, functional septic system, clear title, sometimes clear title is an issue. And if they can't do that within the time frame, it's the buyer wouldn't be at risk for losing their deposit if the seller didn't comply with everything. But if the buyer hasn't complied with everything, that's all there is to it. They're putting that at risk.
Yeah, I think in this situation, it was like the lending institution just kept asking for more and more and more. And I mean, I don't know.
That's the golden rule. They have the gold, so they make the rules. So that
Right.
means the buyer needs to comply with whatever will result in the funding. Whether they get tired of it or not, or they're aggravated, the lender can keep asking questions. So.
But if they withdrew the commitment, the lender withdrew the commitment, they should have gotten their deposit back. Did they withdraw the commitment? Because they didn't have whatever they wanted?
The lending institution didn't withdraw. No. They just kept asking for, so I think inevitably, I mean, I guess in reality, the buyer ended up saying, we're a month and a half past when we were supposed to close, and we've done everything we were told to do, and you still aren't closing us. So I think they ended up at that time saying, we're going to go with another lender, and the seller said, too late.
Right. Well, if the buyer walks away from a lender that they, that's provided a commitment letter, that's the buyer walking away from the transaction. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know the specifics of the transaction.
Right.
Speaking in generalities. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks everyone. I appreciate it.